Henry VIII of England, a Historical Humans production. Here at Historical Humans, we tend to look at the history of the human race. Unfortunately, most of the time, we examine only the events of history, and that means that sometimes we can forget that everything we talk about begins and ends with real human beings. These are the people that shaped history for better or for worse, and one of these people was King Henry VIII of England. Henry VIII inherited the English crown from his father, Henry VII, in the year 1509 at the ripe old age of 18. Henry had become heir to the English crown 7 years prior when his older brother, Prince Arthur, decidedly stopped living and ended any chance we had of seeing a historical Arthur, King of the Britons. At the second king of the Tudor dynasty, Henry came to power at the time of relative prosperity for the English monarchy. The coffers were full, and the English Parliament had not had to have convened in 5 whole years. Henry himself, at this time, was a man of good standing and great potential in the eyes of England and the nations of Europe. He was a renowned athlete, a devoted scholar, a lavish patron of the arts, and a pious man of faith. Despite 7 years to prepare for kingship and the remarkably favorable start with which he found himself, Henry had no interest in actually ruling his kingdom. Fortunately for Henry, he had been introduced to a clergyman named Thomas Wolsey through his father, and Wolsey was more than happy to bear the strain of actual governance for the young king. So happy, in fact, that he became both the Lord Chancellor of England and a Catholic cardinal with a papal legate in 1515. This had the unique benefit of granting him the authority to act politically in the name of both the King of England and the Catholic Pope simultaneously. Wolsey acted as King Henry in both domestic and foreign affairs. At home, the Star Chamber was reformed into the premier judiciary for the King's justice. It acted as an efficient and relatively impartial relative compared to the openly bribable and politically aligned lesser courts of the day, dispensary of justice in the name of King Henry, but through the will of Wolsey. Abroad, dominating the politics of Western Europe occupied much of Henry and Wolsey's time. Western Europe was divided into 2 powerful camps: the French Valois dynasty under Francis I and the Habsburg dynasty of the Holy Roman Empire under Charles V. Both were larger and more powerful than the island nation now seeking to control them. To accomplish this, they had committed diplomacy by mass expenditure. This culminated in the Field of the Cloth of Gold, an 18-day and £15 million modern currency expense designed to promote a Europe-wide peace treaty between the 3 nations, a peace that would set England as the arbiter for all disputes between the other nations, that saw Henry's diplomacy consist of attempting to drunkenly fight the French king in an impromptu wrestling match. War broke out the next year between France and the Holy Roman Empire. England, naturally, handled this event with all great aplomb it had mustered during the Field of Cloth of Gold by picking a fight with both sides. England invaded France in 1523, only to betray the Holy Roman Empire and side with the French in 1528, only a single year before hostilities came to a close. The 1520s were not a wholly sordid affair for the English foreign policy. In 1521, Henry received the now very much ironic title Defender of the Faith from Pope Leo X for his best-selling book. It sold in 20 separate editions throughout Europe, attacking one Martin Luther of Lutheranism fame, titled Defense of the Seven Sacraments. There is some debate as to whether this book was in fact written by Henry himself or with contributions from his friend Sir Thomas More, literary satirist and author of Utopia. Henry's government also oversaw the creation of the First United Kingdom through the Acts of Union of 1536 and 1542. This did several things. First, the King of the United Kingdom of England and Wales, and not just England. Henry's title got a nice promotion. And secondly, it gave Welsh representation in the English, now United Kingdom's Parliament in exchange for the Welsh adopting a series of administrative land divisions imposed by the English. This wasn't the worst deal ever for the Welsh, as the English had annexed them about 2.5 centuries prior and had proceeded to give the Welsh mostly nothing for that entire period. Effectively, the Welsh had been traded for some of their autonomy within their own marshlands, the opportunity to shout at Englishmen in London and help overthrow the monarchy in the Cromwell Uprising about a century later. Upon his accession to the throne, Henry had decided to do the most practical thing for monarchs at the time and marry. For his bride he chose his brother's widow. Yeah, that actually happened. And so, Catherine of Aragon, soon to be Catherine, the first of many, most of whom didn't even bother to have different names from one another, became the Queen of England despite the death of her previous husband. Catherine and her daughter, Mary, the future Queen of England, would cause the dismissal and death of Cardinal Lord Chancellor Wolsey, as Henry was only the second monarch of his father's dynasty. He did not feel it safe to leave the crown of England to a daughter. As such, Henry had decided he needed a son, and after 20 years of marriage, he did not have one. So he did the next logical thing, of demanding that the Pope declare an annulment to his marriage because, apparently refusing to consummate and giving birth to only women was apparently the same thing to this man. When Wolsey proved unable to gain this annulment from Pope Clement VII in 1529, for obvious reasons of Princess Mary existing, Henry had him dismissed and arrested for treason, where he died awaiting trial. Dark stuff. Through the efforts of Henry's new chief advisor, Thomas Cromwell, in Parliament and the appointment of a willing Archbishop of Canterbury in the form of Thomas Cranmer, Henry was able to grant himself the annulment he so desired in 1533. Within a week of the annulment, Henry had managed to marry himself his second wife, Anne Boleyn. This sparked outrage from Pope Clement VII, whose response was to excommunicate Henry from the Catholic Church. Henry, in turn, responded by declaring himself the head of the church, simultaneously founding the Church of England and removing himself from the authority of Rome. The result of this royal game of "I know you are, but what am I?" was the English Reformation. With it came the beginning of the Catholic-Protestant divide that would trouble the British Isles for centuries. But hey, the king got to remarry, so a win, I guess? Henry then proceeded to go on a wife-hunting streak after Anne Boleyn produced a daughter, Princess Elizabeth, who would one day be one of the longest-reigning monarchs of history, but that still isn't good enough for Henry VII, apparently. And thus, to go 2-0 on his sexist policies, Henry had Anne Boleyn executed for the treasonous crime of giving birth to a daughter, because that's apparently what qualifies as treason now, in the year of our Lord 1536. But, in 1537, Henry was already on to his third wife. This one, known as Jane Seymour, had a good fortune of giving birth to a son and then dying of childbirth before Henry could decide that this too was a crime. Her son would be the future King Edward VI, the far less competent than his sisters, who would be king at 9 and dead at 15. After the death of Jane Seymour, Henry decided to take time to speedrun his next marriage to Anne of Cleves. Chosen from her portrait, Henry married her in January of 1540 and divorced her in July. The political arrangements surrounding the marriage had fallen through prior to the wedding even taking place. Combined with Henry's inability to get it going in the bedroom with her, this led to a very swift, but once actually non-lethal end to the marital arrangement. Next would be Catherine Howard, Anne Boleyn's cousin, who went into this marriage most certainly not expecting to share her cousin's fate, because why would that happen twice? Howard lasted 2 years before she was beheaded in 1542 after sleeping with a nobleman, Francis Derham. It was Catherine Parr who would ultimately win this race, outliving Henry by over a year and surviving a full 14 years of childless marriage to a man, despite having a daughter from a previous spouse. The daughter from another man was, for some reason, more tolerable to the older Henry than the creation of a daughter of his own. So ended the reign of King Henry VIII, succeeded first by his son Edward VI, then his daughters Mary I, aka Bloody Mary because of course religion is murder fest, now thanks Dad, and Elizabeth I, also known as the Virgin Queen because no way am I gonna have anything to do with my father's obsession, respectively. And this wraps up our first episode of Historical Humans, talking about the humans who created history. If you guys enjoyed today's video, please be sure to drop a like down below, be sure to subscribe for more content like this, And if there is something that you would like to see, be sure to leave a comment down below letting us know what that is. And please be sure to check out all of our social medias listed below. Thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you guys next time.